Today is about resumes, building a resume worth promoting. And I'm very happy to say that we have three very special guest speakers who have probably between them seen, I don't know, at least 2,000 or 3,000 resumes in their lifetimes. So we couldn't ask for a better group of people and professionals to give advice, opinions, and perspectives on how to develop and promote a resume. So having said that, I'm going to introduce the panel. We have Angelique Malauulu-Hager. She's with Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, and she's a lawyer development manager there. This is Angelique. We also have Darren Carmassi, legal recruiter at Pathways Personnel and formerly a recruiter at Bingham McCutcheon. And we have Kristen Love-Boscia, who is an attorney at the Law Office of Kristen Love-Boscia, and she specializes in both family and immigration. And prior to that, she was with Bay Area Legal Aid for many years. Okay, so before we get into the heart of it, the meat of it, I want to describe to you what I would say, and probably some of my guest speakers would say to you when you're thinking about the resume. And there are really three focal points or three key points you should consider when you're going to draft that resume or edit it or think about who your target audience is. And those focal points are: one, why is the employer going to hire you? What are you bringing to the table? Have that in your mind as you're drafting that resume, as you're thinking about those marketable points. Does your academic and practical work support the position you're applying for? And if it doesn't, how are we going to make you marketable? It could be transferable skills, it could be soft skills, it could be leadership. But we need to think about ways to make you look marketable if the academic and the professional or practical doesn't support what you're interested in. And also, how are you going to add value to the legal team or environment that you're working for? Whether it's a firm, corporation, agency, how are you going to integrate into that legal team? And we're going to talk about elements of the resume, and this particular last point is really important in the legal resume because it shows the employer the well-rounded you, the holistic candidate, if you will. Are they going to want to work with you for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day? So bring something into your resume that describes who you are outside of your academics and your practical work so they can see a more, just that, well-rounded you. So those are three focal points that I think are very important in drafting and considering everything from the foundation to the content of your resume. So now I'm going to throw it to our panelists, and I'd like to ask each of you to describe a little bit about your background and what led you into the positions that you are in now, and then we'll get more into the substance of the actual resume. So Kristen, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I graduated from Santa Clara Law in 2008, and I was very fortunate to be hired on by Bay Area Legal Aid as a one-year fellow position. And I was hired into the San Mateo County office up in Redwood City, doing family law and immigration law for low-income domestic violence survivors. After my one-year fellowship, I was kept on as a staff attorney, and I stayed there until I went out on maternity leave in June of 2011. So then I was out for a while, and then actually transferred to the San Jose office of Bay Area Legal Aid when I came back from maternity leave. And then actually just this March, I left Bay Area Legal Aid and opened my own practice. So now I'm working part-time, still doing family law and immigration law, but able to spend some more time with my daughter.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, I was recently the regional director of legal recruiting for Bingham McCutcheon. I actually started with McCutcheon Doyle and then, as law firms do today, merge. So they merged with Bingham Dana and became Bingham McCutcheon. And I was with the firm for 15 years, and I recently left the firm, and now I'm on the other side doing attorney placements and legal placements, both in-house and with law firms.
And I am also a law school graduate. I graduated from Boston University School of Law when you guys were all not born yet, probably. And actually started my career at Bingham Dana in Boston, practiced for several years, and came to Santa Clara, where I was basically Morgan's predecessor. So we got to work together, and Kristen was here as a student at that time, got to work with Darren, very small world.
And that's one big point.
It is a very small world, so People talk. And after being here for a couple of years, I was recruited to join ORIC as a lawyer development manager, which is basically being in professional development. So I'm responsible for a lot of different facets, including some recruiting facets, diversity, public interest, but mainly my focus is welcoming our summer associates and our new associates and putting together trainings and retreats and orientations for our attorneys at various promotion points, from new associate to managing associate to senior associate and to partners. So we do training at all different levels. We even do executive MBA training for the firm leaders. So we look at a lot of different core competencies, benchmarks, basically the various skills that we think it takes for attorneys to be successful and to keep growing in their practice and moving on.
So you have three very different and unique perspectives here. We have Kristen, who was in the nonprofit world, who is now a solo practitioner. We have Darren, who was in the recruiting world at a very large firm and is now representing clients and customers and candidates from a wide variety of backgrounds, both corporate and legal and otherwise. And we have Angelique, who was an attorney, was then in the world of academia as an advisor, and now is back at a firm in a lawyer management development role, which is very interesting. So we're going to talk more about each of these backgrounds and how they play into giving you advice and perspectives and how to draft that great resume. And I want to ask you guys, so of the focal points that we just mentioned, would you agree with those? And do you have any variations or opinions on what's been stated?
I totally agree. We want to see the whole individual, and that is important. One of the things that we do is we look at your, of course we look at your education and your experience, but we also want to make sure that there's somebody that can roll up their sleeves, and you want to be with somebody for 14 hours. Be with that person. So they do want to see that you are a whole individual. That is a good point.
I would definitely agree, and I would say for the public interest and very small firm perspective, I would really highlight the second one, the having practical experience or some sort of connection, definitely in the public interest area, and then also within a small practice, having interest or experience in those practice areas specific that the lawyer is practicing.
Yeah, and I want to go back to one thing that Morgan said, which is, we acknowledge that a lot of you, maybe your first job out of law school or the summer is going to be your first job ever, or at least in an office, and you may not feel like you have the kind of skills that legal employers are looking for, but there are transferable skills. So say the only thing you've ever done is work at Foot Locker. Like, how is that going to be relevant to an employer? Well, what did you do at Foot Locker? Did you have some leadership opportunities where you managed other people? That's important. Did you have to work in a very time pressure filled environment? That shows the employer that you can work under pressure. There are a lot of things you can look at, and I know Vicki and Morgan can help you to hone in on those things, but really that will help employers understand, why do I want to hire this person, which is the bottom line. They're going to look at your GPA, they're going to look at all the filters, but at the end of the day, is this someone who is actually going to add some value to us and be a good member of our team? And that's what you want to focus on.
Absolutely.
And also those jobs also show client service, which when you go to work in a law firm, not only are you a service to the clients, you're a service to the partner that you work for. It just goes to show, if you are a bartender, a waitress, any of those, that you can interact with people and, make sure that because you will have clients as the staff. Everyone is a potential client, and if you could show success at that in your work history, that's a big plus.
Thank you. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into the actual structure of the resume. And it's really important to point out here that people come from a wide variety of backgrounds. And you're going to send your resume to employers that have a variety of opinions. And you're going to hear three distinct opinions today. And what's really important to remember is to keep everything into perspective and remember what's going to be useful to you. You're going to see different styles, different formats, different ways of presenting content. And what is really important for you to take away from all the advice that you're getting is what's going to work best for you to promote that skill set, to promote the content that you want to reach out to employers, and to promote you as that well-rounded or holistic candidate that we're talking about. So we don't want to overwhelm you with this information. What we're trying to do is provide substance for you so that you can go back and draft that initial resume with confidence. And confidence is key here. So there are a few basic things that need to be represented in a standard resume. And that is name and contact information easily displayed. Clearly printed, clearly visible. We're going to have probably some differences of opinions here, but I personally believe that you should have one address. I think if you have a permanent address and a current address, it can send a conflicting message to an employer. Are they leaving after graduation? Are they staying? Where do I send things? And so in my opinion, it's nice to have one address and have that be your focal address and make sure you're checking, not that everything comes by mail these days, but if it were checking that address frequently, that you have your education, and some of you have long professional histories before entering law school, and we recognize that and we appreciate it, but as a law student, we're now going to redirect your education to the top because we want that to be your focal point and that you're a law student. I will tell that to a person who's been in the industry for 25 years or a person green out of undergrad. So for some of you, it might be difficult to make that transition. And then under that, you may have a relevant skills, a relevant coursework section, or something along those lines. You may have a long section of awards and honors, and we're going to talk about that. And then you're going to lead into your experience section. And included in that might be things like community involvement or volunteer work. You might have some publications after that, and we'll talk more specifically about what works for you. And then you're going to have that personal interest section if you have room and can afford to do that, and I highly recommend you consider it. And that can be additional, personal, it could be sports, it could be that you've traveled extensively, but most important in this section is that you're relating to your target audience and that you're being interesting. The whole point of the interest section is to foster and nurture a conversation. You want your employer to ask you questions based upon whatever is in that interest section. So it's not that you love to cook, it's that you experiment with international cuisine, including Indian and Italian. It's not that you love to bake, it's that you enjoy eating and baking cupcakes. You know, be creative about this, but keep it true to who you are.
I was just going to throw it in there. I remember one candidate had on her interest how to grill, she could grill a perfect steak. That helped her just come to the top because it was a good hook. Although I do want to say one thing, I think that the current address and a permanent address can work also for you. If you're going to school here in Santa Clara, but you want to really end up in Boston, you need those Boston employers to know why you're even looking there. And it kind of goes that way when I would have candidates from the East Coast. I would look, at GPAs, and I'd also look at why do they want to come to Northern California. And you can see their permanent address, they're from here. So you can use it for you or against you.
And that's a great statement to remembering your target audience. So Darren brings up a good point. If you're going to school at Santa Clara, but you're targeting firms in Boston or New York, and you think that's where you're going to be or that's where you're originally from, then having that on there would be a good idea. So remember who it is you're applying to.
I agree with that. That was going to be my statement. And also, I'm sure you guys are going to go over cover letters as well, and that would be a place to flesh out the explanation of why you are going to be looking in a different area outside your law school area.
Although, your cover letter isn't that important anymore. We don't really look at cover letters as much. That's why your resume really needs to sell you and tell your story. Because a lot of times, especially at Santa Clara, we will do a pre-screen. We rip off the top of the cover letters and then just look at the resume. I will tell you that. Well, unless we need to go back to the cover letter,
right.
If there's a question to be answered, we will go back to it. But you have 6 to 8 seconds is what we average for your recruiter to get your attention. So keep that in mind.
It also depends on who's looking, right?
That's true. That
because
is very true.
I think for some public interest, I used to work for legal services in Boston. I think public interest organizations may look at the cover letters more than a corporate recruiter. I know from the law school standpoint, it is true for summer associate positions. They really do look at those keywords and the key GPAs and top whatever percent of your class. But if you're coming in as a lateral, we do pay more attention to your cover letters and what your story is and what your history is, because then you're a more developed attorney, hopefully. At that point.
That's true. So we do look at, and also if you're a third year looking for a position with a firm and maybe you got engaged over the summer and your significant other is now in this area and you summered in New York, that is a good place to explain it, because we would love, you were a success in New York, we'd love to have you here. So that's the other, you can explain why you're out in the market again in a cover letter. But it is true for that.
And I was going to add, since we're talking about targeting, one thing that I tell a lot of people who come to ask me about resumes and how to get their foot in the door at a large law firm or any employer really is, even though it takes more time and effort, read the job description and look at the keywords and use those in your resume and use those in your cover letter. Because if you're just sending out a form cover letter and your form resume, it may not even make it through, sometimes there's automated systems that, review the resumes. I don't know if you guys use it, but I know a lot of corporations do. And if you don't have those keywords that are targeted, that show that you've read the job description, you've researched the company, you've found out what their culture is. I mean, there's a law firm here that, their thing is surfing. They love surfing. So if you happen to be a surfer, if you're interested in surfing, throw that in there. Make it part of your conversation and show them that you've really thought about it, because form letters and form resumes, even if you are the top 1% in your class, may not get you in if you don't fit the firm culture or the company culture.
And in today's world, when you can tweak your resume, and we all know that you could tweak your resume directly to the company or to the firm, and you want to just make sure that you're the best candidate for that job. And it is so true to read the job description and then tweak your resume to it. And then the next job you apply, tweak it again. I mean, that is kind of where everyone is in today's world. We're looking for that best candidate for that job.
And that actually brings up a good point about the resume being a fluid document. And Darren, I'm actually glad you brought up the cover letter point, because it goes back to what should be your focal point? What should be your primary source of interest when you're developing and putting together that application? So for a company like Darren's, they may not be focused on the cover letter. So you need to make sure that that well-rounded candidate that we're talking about is coming out very clearly in your resume. There are other firms and agencies and corporations that rely heavily on the cover letter to get that backstory, to find out your passion, your purpose, your interest, your involvement, and your knowledge base in an area. So really look at what the firm and the agency is looking for, and if they're asking for a cover letter, that's a pretty good sign that they want something of substance in there. So we're going to talk more about what you think represents the complete and well-rounded application package. And I want to ask each of you specifically about content and the format and structure of a resume and what you've seen, the critiques you've given, and also what you would recommend. But before we go into that, I'd like to show you a couple of examples, because just as Darren touched on the fact, and Angelique touched on the fact, that your resume needs to be a fluid document and it needs to mirror or represent what your employer is looking for in that target audience, styles and formats can change as well and have changed over the years. Since I've been here, what, 6.5, almost 7 years, 100 years. The styles have definitely changed. When I first came, the traditional paragraph format was something that you didn't stray too far from. That's what firms liked, and what firms liked is what we put out. And so the traditional Jane Bronco representation there is what used to be standard, and in some ways still is very standard with some of the traditional firms out there. We also have what I would consider a targeted and fresh approach. And this is one sample of it, but it can have many variations. It can be a hybrid of the paragraph format and the bullet point, but basically what it's doing is it's targeting specific skill set and high functionality. High marketability and high functionality. So in the case of the targeted and fresh resume, we have a candidate who is perhaps a little bit more seasoned, a second or third year, maybe a recent grad, who is targeting specific exposure that she's had at the agencies, the firms, or the corporations she's been with. Each line represents a specific focus. And in addition to that, she's highlighted some skills or highlighted qualifications, or in this case, skills summary. This is a little bit non-traditional for a legal resume. This is what you would see typically of an MBA resume. But it's been my opinion that employers are actually pretty receptive to this, especially now when, as Darren said, they can spend maybe less than 10 seconds on a resume. They want to see your skill set very easily, very quickly, easy to identify. Okay, what's this person bringing to the table? How are they going to complement my legal team? Why should I hire them? And in some cases, the paragraph format is just a little bit too bulky, a little bit too lengthy, where the bulleted and skill summary format lends itself to a very easy flow, an easy read, and allows your reader to easily identify your skill set and your talents and what you're incorporating into that legal team. So both methods are equally fantastic, but think about your skill set, think about your background, think about who you are as an individual and how that's best going to be represented on paper. And play around with these different formats and see which one works best for you. There's no right or wrong here. It's about developing your skills, your qualifications, and those marketable assets. So now I'm going to ask all three of you, Kristen, let's start with you. Let's get into content. So you've seen tons of resumes. Now, for you, what is it that you're looking for specifically? What stands out to you? And do you have a style and a format that you prefer?
So for content, first I should say, when I was at Bay Area Legal Aid, I was the person for the San Mateo County office who was in charge of recruiting for law students and other volunteers during the school year. And then I also helped with the hiring process for Bay Legal as a whole organization during the summers. We have offices in all the Bay Area counties. We would hire about 55 law clerks for the summer. So in terms of content, we were looking for very specific things for people who wanted to come work at Bay Area Legal Aid. So one is a relevant language. What I mean by relevant, a language that would be helpful to the clients that we were working with. So like French, not very helpful. Spanish, very helpful. But there are certainly some people who only speak French. So if you can kind of sell the language, like, yeah, I think that this might be helpful. Or Russian would be helpful in San Francisco, but not as helpful in San Mateo County, for example. So language is a big one. Another big one is having some sort of public interest, social justice experience. And that's a really big one. If people had, they were saying that they really wanted to come work at Bay Legal for the summer, but they had no experience even volunteering anywhere before, that was kind of a red flag. Like, why do they want to come work here this summer? Are they really committed to public interest social justice issues? We're also looking at if there's some sort of academic thing that you've done well. So if you've gotten a Witkin Award, or if you're on law review, or your grades are very good. So something like that that shows that you're also you're a well-balanced person. You have academics and you have other interests. And then also if there's some sort of experience or interest in one of our specific practice areas. So if you really wanted to do family law or immigration law, for example, if you had taken one of those classes in school, or if you had written a paper about something, or done something that was relevant to one of those practice areas. That's the kind of things that I was looking for content-wise at Bay Legal. And now in my solo practice, I actually have a Santa Clara law student who's my intern right now, and then I continue to meet with law students and recent grads who are looking into getting into family law and immigration law. And I think the things that I'm looking for in those resumes are very similar from the small firm perspective, looking for people who have a genuine interest in family law or immigration law, or some sort of transferable litigation skills. And then in terms of which one do I prefer? I think I think both of them could be very effective, but I think just making sure that the content is very relevant. I think maybe from the public interest and small firm perspective, we're spending more time than less than 10 seconds. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that I'm spending my time reading, that it's worth reading.
And what would you say to the student that doesn't have any direct experience, let's say any exposure to family law, immigration, never had a clinical experience of any kind? What sort of soft, or what would you consider transferable skills would you look for, whether that's customer exposure, crisis management, some research and writing, even though it's not legal? Would you be looking for those types of things?
Yes, definitely. I mean, honestly, first I would just say, you know what, why don't you call Morgan and see if she can help you find someone, because I think that it's really important, even if it's some sort of like a short-term volunteer experience that you can have, whether it's in the legal setting or some other, and I think you kind of mean this, like something that's somewhat relevant. So for family law, there are a lot of domestic violence agencies, for example, where you can, as a law student, you could volunteer either helping people with preparing restraining orders, or even just in the other, in not an illegal setting, but there's other places where you could do something to help out. So I would say my first priority, or my preference would be for you to actually go out and find something and start doing something tomorrow. And if that's not an option, if you have to turn this resume in tomorrow and you don't have time to go get something relevant on your resume, then yes, I would definitely encourage thinking about what things could be relevant in your background. I would definitely echo what the other panelists said about customer service, having some sort of interacting with people. If you answered phones anywhere, I think that that's a very relevant experience, because in family law, it's very much dealing with people and understanding what they're asking and helping them find resources and answering questions about their specific fact situation.
And that's a beautiful example of being specific and knowing your target audience. So we're this arrow here, be specific. I can't stress it enough. It's not that you've just researched, it's maybe that you researched domestic violence issues or child and family issues. It's not that you just wrote things, it's that you assisted your supervisor in developing a package that was going to be promoted to said target audience. The more specific you are, whether you have those direct skills or indirect skills, the more your employer is going to relate to you and ultimately visualize you at the workplace, or not. So think about those specifics when you're drafting out, whether it's paragraph format or the bullet format. What is going to draw the employer in? What specific skill set, talent, or exposure can I list here that's going to entice the reader to want you to come in and interview? So think about these things. So Darren, let's get your perspective on it. Going back and forth between both samples, but then also, please explain to me what you think, and this is going back from your firm experience and also now, to what you're looking for in the way of content and substance.
Okay, I do like the bullet points. I don't mind the paragraph format. I do think it sometimes people can get too lengthy in the paragraph and you kind of lost me 2 lines down. But one thing that I think that we've all said is to make your resume relevant, also make sure it shows success. So that kind of goes to list your awards, your competitions, your journals, list those on there. One thing you don't need to list is your coursework, and you don't need to list your LSAT score. We know you got into law school. And coursework, I don't know if you feel it's important to put relevant coursework. We're going to look at your transcripts. So don't waste the room on your resume to list your coursework. Use that to sell yourself in another way.
Darren, just a quick question. Would it make a difference if the student is not right now taking a certain course, but will be taking a course that might be relevant to mention it? And this is for you as well.
Because then your resume is kind of betting on the come as opposed to who you are right now. You could put that in your interest, that you're interested in intellectual property law, and if you're asked about it, you could say I'm taking it next semester. But I don't think I would put that I will be taking.
So I get this question a lot as well, and for Kristen, maybe if there's someone who hasn't done anything that's in the realm of what you're doing, would it make a difference for them to say, I am currently, preparing to take on a VAWA case, or I am, interested in doing something, taking a clinic next semester? Is that something that would make a difference to you, like what you're looking for?
Well, I would actually, I like seeing relevant coursework if it's actually relevant. Like if a person has taken family law and they put that on there, I think that that's helpful, because it's a different area of practice. But if they're thinking about it or working on getting into
Right. It's kind of, I'm going to do.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I kind of also want to say this is where it's important to tweak your resume. Exactly what Kristen said could be why she would take somebody and why a big law firm wouldn't. You wouldn't take anyone who is only done corporate work and has worked in companies. We're not going to take anyone that is so public interest bent that we don't want, we have so few slots to give to our candidates, and if they're really interested in public interest, we know we may not get them down the road. So that's where it's fine to have 2 different resumes and sell yourselves that way, but it's kind of like, God, we can only invite X amount of students back, but this one is really interested in public interest. Although they look great, I think we should pass and go to this one. So that's where tweak your resume to Kristen and tweak it to the law firm.
Exactly, and I'm just going to interject to say that depending on who you're targeting, that relevant coursework, as both Darren and Kristen said, it can be important. It may not be, depending on who you're targeting. So, for example, say I'm working with a student, they don't have a lot of practical work, they've come fresh out of undergrad to law school, but we want to show the employer that they have a dedicated interest, a pattern of interest, if you will, that they are going to be interested in family law or corporate law. Let's say now we're going into the 2nd year and we want to demonstrate that they've had coursework exposure that complements this interest. Then I would be a fan of that relevant coursework. We're sort of beefing up the marketability where it lacks in other areas. And the one thing I will say about the, what's to come, I too am not a big fan of putting coursework on that may be done unless there is a direct and specific purpose. For example, people who are thinking about taking the patent bar or who are going to take the patent bar and want to go into patent law, and we're indicating to the employer that, for example, this time around, that you will be taking the patent bar in December or January. That is actually, that can be important because you're demonstrating to the employer that pattern of interest and that you're serious about this. So I think you really have to weigh it out, figure out who it is that you're applying to, what they're looking for specifically, and what you're bringing to the table as far as substance, and where we have to sort of fill in those holes, if you will. Angelique?
If I could just say one thing real quickly, the fact that you will be planning to take the patent bar also shows the employer that you're qualified to take it, and that is important to the employer, that you have those qualifications.
Okay, so let's get some input from you, Angelique, on what you think is marketable in the way of content, style, formats that you prefer. And I want to take it a little bit further with you because you have worked with law students and grads, and now you're working with active attorneys. So, where are the differences there, and how do you morph that resume to keep that marketability?
Right, so I think Kristen and Darren have covered a lot of the things that you really need to focus on going into your first legal job. One thing I will say, and this is kind of a no-brainer, but I will say it again because I have been flabbergasted by the number of resumes I've seen where there are typos. Yeah. This is a writing sample. Have 5 of your friends read it, please, and make sure that they check everything, line by line, word for word, because if there is a typo in your resume, most companies will say, nope, out the door, because you didn't take the time to be thorough and detail-oriented. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the way it is. I mean, it's something that will make or break you. So what we look at so Darren's pretty much covered, generally getting in the door at a law firm. For lateral hires, and these are for those of you who may, go to legal services and decide you want to go corporate, or you start corporate and decide you want to go legal. We, again, really focus on, is this person going to fit in with our culture? Have they researched us? Are they giving us a reason and demonstrating that they have a passion for what we do and convincing us? So you have to be your own advocate. This is a marketing piece. What is your personal brand? What are you communicating? And I'll get into my take on that later. But so we have criteria for advancement, and they consist of being a lawyer second to none. So this is all of your, your writing skills, your oral communication skills. Do you know the substance of the law? Have you demonstrated interest in it? So whatever practice area you want to go into, show that you have those skills and that you're focused on them. Another one is leadership skills. Even as a very junior attorney, you have leadership skills because you're going to be working with paralegals and secretaries and clerks and various people who you have to manage and communicate well with and show that you can lead a team, manage a project. So those are things that you can take from basically any other job you've had. And then the last thing that we really look at is the client dimension. Do you have customer service skills? Can you talk to people? Can you manage a crisis where someone's yelling at you and screaming at you? Because that will happen from partners, from clients, from judges. Can you be calm and collected under pressure? So those are kind of things that we look at, and there are ways to communicate that in your resume, whether it's bullets, which I do really like. I like the bullets because it pops out at you, especially if you only have 10 seconds to look at a resume, or in a paragraph. Instead of, prepared a motion for summary judgment, successfully prepared, successfully argued, demonstrate success, as Darren said. So these are things that we really look at. You want it to pop out. And you want your resume to be really user-friendly. I received 3-page resumes, and I never get past the first paragraph and the second page. I mean, you may have loads of wonderful experience and publications, but really think about, okay, do I really need every single employer to see every single thing I've ever done? Or what of these wonderful 3 pages of wonderful accomplishments I have will this particular employer care about? And make it easy for the employer. Really speak to that employer. I don't know if that answered your question. I've kind of been rambling. But as far as format, just show it to as many friends as possible. Is it easy to read and easy to understand, and no typos?
And if you have done, you've never worked, but you volunteered here for a month and you worked here for a month, that's another big space taker to put list 2-month jobs all the way down with the dates, which it kind of just gets to a point you kind of look at, oh, they jumped around a lot until the recruiter breaks down that you really did that while you were going to college or undergrad or while you were going. You could break that into just one little area and make it a passion. Volunteered with, as an advocate for X, Y, and Z, and you can kind of sell it in a short point. But that can pop out. That.
Absolutely. And let's get into the specific areas. So, Kristen, having a background in nonprofit and now also focusing on both family and immigration, what are things that you're looking for in a resume for people who are interested in these practice areas? I mean, certainly we have people in the audience here who are interested in family or immigration or nonprofits. So if we're sticking to that one-page model, if you will, which I will say that my personal opinion is it really depends on the person. I highly recommend, especially as a law student, you wouldn't even think about going past 2 pages. I'm sorry, you're just not there yet. But sometimes if you have, say, 5, 10, 15 years of professional history and you have some rich substance that warrants going on to those 2 pages, we definitely need to look at that as an option and try to figure out if we're removing that, does that take away from your marketability? But I think that is most certainly a case-by-case basis, and we have to really take a look, as Angelique and Darren and Kristen said, we have to take a look at the specific marketability there. But let's get back to practice area specific for a moment. So let's just say we're taking the one-page model. Would you like to see volunteer work, maybe some leadership, some student involvement, particular practice area exposure, and if they haven't had that, some exposure in their background that would demonstrate sort of that pattern of interest that we're talking about? What is the most important component to you on the resume?
I think, okay, so my law clerk right now is awesome. But if, eventually she will move on. So when I'm looking for a new law clerk, for example, I would love to see someone, who has the relevant coursework again. So if they have some sort of, already have some understanding of either family or immigration law, I think would be really helpful for me. And if they don't have those, other volunteer work I think would be helpful. So whether it's, volunteering with some sort of organization where they're working with immigrants, and doesn't have to be doing immigration law, but just working with people from who are not from here, I think is very relevant and transferable for my practice area. And then also volunteering in some other sort of organization or nonprofit or agency or something, working with people in crisis, in any type of crisis, because all of my clients are in crisis. So having that, being able to stay calm and work under pressure and helping people who are, in any other situation they'd be fine, but they happen to be in a very stressful situation right now. So working with people in a high stress situation.
And if you're sitting out in the audience thinking, oh crap, I don't have any of this, what am I going to do? There are ways you can incorporate that as a student that may not take up a summer or a semester. For example, alternative spring break, where you're going into crisis situations or emergency situations, and you're offering legal skills, you're offering skills in other areas in the way of social justice or just downright compassion, and you're incorporating those into that practical work, that's something that you can list on your resume. That's very powerful. So don't think you have to take an entire summer to get that. There are ways to be creative about bringing out those skill sets and making yourself look marketable, in addition to doing something really great for a community. So now, Darren and Angelique, I would like to again keep on the sort of the practice area theme we've got going right now. Darren, for you, obviously some corporate and some IP elements, and Angelique, for you, I want to just talk about marketability as a whole and what these guys can be doing now as students to look marketable when they're that first or second year associate, and get into the habit of tweaking that resume and tweaking their skills to bring out that maximum exposure, optimum marketability, if you will. So Darren, let's start with you.
Well, I'm going to say, even from a law student up through a partner candidate that I get in, it's interesting to see, you are all bright and you bring a lot to the table. Just show us what you bring to the table. We can quickly see your law school, your undergraduate, but one thing in a resume that really kind of helps you stand out, even from partner candidates, if there's a direct theme. So are you public interest? That's what Kristen's going to want to see, that you really are, that the theme is there in classes you've taken, the jobs you've done, volunteer opportunities, and that makes you bring more than just your regular coursework to the table. I mean, even partner candidates, what boards they're on, what they do in their, it kind of brings back, once again, it usually is one central theme, that the firm is going to, or the company is like, we need this person. They bring X, Y, and Z to us that we don't have. Excellent. Thank you. And just that.
I have 5 different resume templates, which might make me look scatterbrained, yes.
As you should.
But I do.
I have 3. Not uncommon, right?
Yeah.
Well,
so I started off actually doing legal services. I work with the homeless and the elderly, so I have that template, and I continually build on it as I do volunteer work. I have my large law firm template. I have my working in academia template. I have recruiting, and I have diversity. And that way, every time I have an accomplishment or another year passes, I try and refresh each of them because, you know what, everybody changes. You don't have to stick with the same thing year after year. As you can see, I've jumped around a lot, and you want to make sure that you're keeping fresh all the different aspects of you that make you a whole person. So that's just in line with,
Right, and I
different
can't
resumes.
tell you how that is really a big thing. I don't need to know that Angelique was in legal aid ever. And,
right.
But in an interview, you're welcome to bring it up, and that's great, but it doesn't stand out.
If it's relevant and shows your value. I know you wanted to speak to something else. Did you?
Just what can they be doing now and thinking about flash forwarding to the future where you're going to come back to them as that professional development manager, the lawyer development manager, and what can they be doing now to help them prepare for that long-standing marketability?
Right. So my number 1 piece of advice is know yourself. And whether that means doing the MBTI with Vicki and Morgan and getting a better sense of what your strengths are, what your passions are, what your interests are, and doing what you love. And then taking a step back and looking at that and then figuring out what are the various practice areas, types of work environments that I think I would thrive in. Because if you do what you love, you're going to excel. And the money will follow. I mean, I really believe that. And then do the externship programs. I mean, one of my favorite law school programs is Northeastern because they require, it's a co-op program, they require everybody to actually go out there and work while they're in school. I mean, you do this in med school, you do this in business school, I think you should definitely do it in law school. And the more you have experiences, real life experiences, instead of just sticking your nose in your books the whole time, the more you're going to get to know yourself and figure out what will make you happy, and therefore what will make you a really good attorney, if that's what you ultimately decide you want to do. Still do excellent work in school, still do, get great grades and all that stuff, but be a really balanced person. Definitely get involved with different organizations, student groups that you feel passionate about. And if there's an area of law that you're really fascinated by, research it. Maybe start writing. I mean, writing is a really good way to get your name out there and make you more marketable. And start thinking about your online presence as well. you could become a student expert in a certain area of law or become really well known for your work in family law or immigration rights. And when people start Googling you, as all employers do, they'll see that, wow, this person, you know, led the charge at Churla or whatever, you know, and that's a really good way to start, you know, building your personal brand, which is something that's near and dear to all of us professionals out there.
The other thing is take advantage of the moot court competitions here at Santa Clara. I can't tell you how over the years how many partners and attorneys will come back and say, we've got to get this. They were amazing. And we've hired probably a number of students over the years just from the moot court competitions.
Right.
That's
So,
right.
And
So-
the clinics as well.
And the clinics
Yeah.
are fantastic.
And that depends on what you're interested in doing. Obviously, if you want to be a transactional attorney, they may not be as relevant, and there are other things you can do, like the externship programs. But there's a lot of things you can do other than just coming to class and, you know, writing your papers and taking your exams. And that's what's going to distinguish you from the rest of the crowd.
but you also, a lot of the clinics and the competitions, you're going to be interacting with the lawyers in the community, which that's always, you know, and interact with them and have them, and get mentors that you can talk to a partner, an attorney in a law firm saying, what classes should I take next year to do that? It's always great to have connections that you built yourself with your own personality. And
How many of you guys have mentors, attorney mentors?
okay.
3? Okay, the rest of you go out and find one.
Yeah.
Or 2 or 3. Seriously, they're going to be so important to you because the more people you network with, go to the diversity gala and get your name out there, and don't just get business cards, follow up those people. You know, be proactive. And if you want me to be your mentor, I'm a mentor to about 50 law students right now, and I'm happy to be. You know, don't be shy. This is your future, your career. And once you knock on someone's door, you're going to find that 9 times out of 10 they're willing to take the time. They're happy
really
to help
want
you.
to.
They may not be there right away. It might have to be 3 or 4 phone calls or emails because we're all really busy, but we are happy to help. And that will be just another set of eyes from the real world, someone else to bounce ideas off of in addition to your wonderful Law Career Services staff. So,
And I'll be
Do it.
happy if you want to get in touch with me to maybe even, introduce you to somebody that has the same interests as you. But I do feel that having a mentor out there in the real world is invaluable.
yeah, think of it as a coach. You know, for those of you who play sports, it's like having a coach for your life.
Absolutely.
The Law Alumni Association is very interested in providing mentors as well, and we have a big event coming up on November 15th, and 3Ls and 4Ls are invited, so it's like a networking mixer kind of thing in downtown San Jose, and we want 3Ls and 4Ls to come, so that would be a great opportunity to come and meet people, and I don't want you to be nervous when we say mentor. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. You don't have to ask someone, oh, will you be my mentor? You just kind of start a relationship with this person, so a friendship, or just some sort of you would get coffee once a quarter or something like that. Just asking them to suggestions on what classes to take, or other people that you should meet, other organizations you should look into, that kind of those kind of things.
And I
are
like that
really
you said
helpful.
friendship, because sometimes the best way to grow these relationships is organically. So if you meet someone and you find that you have a similar interest, maybe 3 out of the 4 conversations you have out of the month are about, football or some guilty pleasure you watch on TV, like Real Housewives, I don't know. But that's how you get to know people.
And there are so many great opportunities to do that. And I agree with you on the word mentor can sometimes be a little intimidating. I heard a great phrase the other day, spheres of influence, and I absolutely love that. Because you want to utilize these people. You want to go to the alumni program. You want to register for the student alumni dinner coming up. You want to reach out to people in the legal community and ask them for their insight and perspectives. And oh, by the way, would you be willing to take a look at my resume to get your advice and feedback right from the source? So the more you tap into that early on, the better off you're going to be 2nd and 3rd year in post-grad, because you're already establishing those connections and nurturing those relationships. And even more importantly, you're learning the art of the conversation and networking and getting comfortable with talking about things like practice area specific information. So it's really important to start that early.
And I would say that I know that a lot of people that I talk to say, oh, I'm shy, or like, oh, the idea of cold calling someone and asking them to go out to coffee with me is so awkward, or sending someone an email. And I just have to say, I'm sorry, you got to get over that. It's super important that you be able to be an advocate for yourself. I think, and you guys would know better, but the 2005 and before, it was a lot easier to get a job, and now it is not easy. And you need to be able to get out there and be able to talk to people and be an advocate for yourself. So especially in the small firm area, just knowing who's hiring. And how do you know who's hiring? Well, you need to talk to lawyers, and lawyers talk to other lawyers, and they know someone else who's hiring. So you just need other people who are out there looking out for you, who know, oh, I just found out about someone who's hiring, let me pass this along to my law student mentee.
You want to be on people's radars, and think of it this way. I'm actually impressed when people have the courage to reach out to me, because I'm like, okay, you know, this person is going to make it, because eventually you're going to have to get up there in front of partners. If you're transactional still, you're going to have to go out there and cold call clients. I mean, this is all part of your development as an attorney. So, as Kristen said, get over it, because if you really want to be an attorney, you're going to have to learn how to just reach out to people. And it's after you do it a few times, it becomes a little less uncomfortable. I don't know if it ever becomes comfortable for some people.
But you know what? Only you care about your career more than anybody else does, and you need to be your own advocate. And that is, you don't know what small, tiny connection, that attorney that you reached out to, you don't know if their spouse is building a legal department, and that is happening a lot right now with different companies, is they are building legal departments that you may fall into, and next thing you know, you've just gone public. So you just don't know that tiny, where if you didn't reach out, you missed out on that lifetime.
I actually have a personal anecdote. So after practicing for several years, I knew I wanted to go into kind of the teaching and counseling realm, and I had no idea how to do it. And so I actually paid my own way to join NEL, went to a conference, did a whole bunch of informational interviews with every single law school career services office. And by the time I had finished kind of like my 6-week tour of this, everyone knew me. And I got to NEL, and they're like, oh yeah, you're Angelique, we heard about you. And when I got back from the NEL conference, I interviewed for a job here and got it. So I'm convinced it was because of networking. And because of that small community that I had networked with during that period of time, I then started getting recruiting calls after being at Santa Clara for about a year to go to places like Orrick. So it works.
Sorry, just to backtrack a little bit, you were asking about what can people do now to think about the resume for the future and applying for the future. Not that I want you to take any time out of studying, but if you were going to surf the internet for a couple of minutes, I think that it's really helpful to look at job postings right now, even though you're not applying for an associate position right now. You're not licensed yet. But I think that it's helpful to look at what employers are asking for, so then you can think about it now and what can you do between now and when you are licensed, rather than, you know, once you have passed the bar and then you start applying for jobs, you realize, oh wow, they're asking for all these things that I don't have. So whether you're, you know, whatever year in school you are, I would encourage you to be looking at job postings for the kinds of jobs that you think you might want further down. And if the stuff on the job posting sounds really terrible in that job description, I think that that's really helpful as well. To maybe think,
I think that's great.
I always thought I wanted to do this type of law, but now that I see what's on the job description, that sounds abysmal, I need to find something else.
And for those 1Ls in the audience who don't have access to SC Law Jobs until you have your advising appointment with us in after November, there are plenty of other sites you can look at. So there's PS LawNet, which I know has a new name now, but there are social justice, public interest social justice sites. There are sites like Glassdoor that feature corporate sites and legal corporate jobs and legal jobs. There are even sites dedicated to patents. PatentBuddy.com is great. So there are definitely EmployerNet, LawJobs.com, LawStudentJobs.net. So there are a lot of ways to get this exposure before you actually have access to SC Law Jobs. And look at LinkedIn. We constantly post jobs on LinkedIn. So look at what the employer is looking for. And it's a great way to not only get an LCS LinkedIn group become a member of that, but also become a member of the Mentor Directory through that. So just very quickly, we've thrown a lot of information at you here, everything from the shell, the foundation, to the content, to what looks marketable, and we don't want to overwhelm you. We don't want you to overthink it. So what are the first steps that you need to take? Start with what you have. We've seen it all. I've seen it all. I've seen the worst of the worst and the best of the best, and everything in between. And so when you come to that first advising appointment, bring what you submitted to your application to law school. Bring what you have. Don't eliminate anything. Let's work through it together and find out what's marketable and what isn't. So don't self-edit. Just think of it as an open canvas, and let's start with what you have and build from there. Make an appointment with Law Career Services for first years after November, or November 1st or after, for second and third years and grads anytime. And we're going to go over these specifics. We're going to talk about your background. We're going to talk more about the importance of marketability and how to find that target audience and learn to look for those key concepts and marketable points. And don't get overwhelmed by edit suggestions. I guarantee you the first edit suggestion you get back to me is going to be all ink. Your resume is probably going to be all ink. Don't worry about that, because what we're trying to do is start with this solid foundation and build from there. So it's a work in progress. It's fluid. And also remember, as our panelists have said, that you need to understand that there are lots of opinions and perspectives. There are lots of practice groups out there. Begin to understand and identify your target audience. And as Angelique said, you may have 2, 3, 4, 5 resumes, but let's start with the one and go from there. Okay, well, I want to thank all of my panelists today. You've provided great information, a lot of insight and perspectives. I'm sure our audience appreciates it. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. And if you have any questions, we have about a minute. So if you'd like to either come down or ask in the audience, we'll be happy to take some of those questions at this time. Right now.
This is kind of a procedural question, but when you receive online resumes, is it helpful, like, if it's named a certain way, like, if you put, like, your own name and year, or?
I would say use your last name.
Use your last
Don't
name.
just call it resume and then the date.
Yeah.
It's tough
Use your
because
last
usually
name.
depending on how employers are receiving them, but yeah, I would say at least have your last name on there.
I say your last name and then your first name and then resume.
Yeah, and a resume.
Because we're going to search through our emails to get your resume. But where's that resume? And
Yeah, and actually for your own purposes, you may even want to put in the employer's name somewhere in the name of the document.
yeah.
If you're applying through Simplicity and you have 3 or 4 resumes, and this also is for cover letters, you're going to want to quickly identify those in the drop boxes. So having your name and the employer name is really helpful.
Is it in any way, like, if you called one, like, family law resume, or, I mean, and your name, don't do that.
I wouldn't say
Yeah,
that a
no,
lot. I would say the employer name,
Yeah,
yeah.
just employer name and,
Because we all know that you have one that's specific for family law, but pretend like you're just family law. Like when I get your resume, I want to know that you just want to do family law and there's nothing else that you're thinking about.
And the other thing is, the resume that you're going to send to Wilson Sonsini is going to be a lot different than the resume that you send to Bingham McCutcheon. You're not going to say to Bingham, I would love to work on your 20 IPOs.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at that and say, they don't know the firm.
Right.
Quick question, Morgan. A lot of people ask me what they should do if they have a personal contact also at the firm that they're applying to. They apply through the online system, and then should they also have their personal contact submit their resume as well? Is there a standard approach on that?
You know, I've kind of evolved over the years on that. I used to think, no, just go through the channels, but you know, I think in today's market, you do anything you can to get your foot in the door and get your name noticed and your resume pulled to the top. And so I think a personal recommendation, you apply anyway, you get your name out there any way you can.
And one thing that I would say though is that make sure that that person that you're sending it to has some pull. So the associate may or may not have that power, but a partner or a hiring partner or someone who's well established within that firm or agency will be able to have that power and that pull for you.
And so that's definitely what I was going to say, because I get a lot of resumes, but if it isn't from a key stakeholder in the firm, it's not really going to go anywhere. If it just comes from someone who has nothing to do with the practice, then I'm kind of not going to regard it as well. But if the individual somehow reaches out to their partner contact and says, you know, I really would like to have a meeting with Angelique, and they sit down and meet with me, and they just make me, you know, just impress me, I will then go to the HR person and say, you know, I think this person would be a really good fit, or I go talk to the recruiting manager. So I would take it even a step further.
Or, but you know, I kind of think though that if you have an associate that's at the firm, they can stop by the recruiter's office and say, Mary Smith is trying to get on OCI or is on the OCI. They are great, you know, good family friend. You know what? It's another way to get noticed.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a great way to do that, have the informational interview. Call up that mentor, the sphere of influence that we're talking about. So how do you get to know these people? Hi, I saw you on LinkedIn in the mentor directory, and I really welcome the opportunity to have a conversation with you about your firm in this particular area. I'm thinking about applying here, and I'd really like to get some tips and advice from you. You go have the informational interview, maybe at the office. Even better, you get to see the location, and they see you there. You connect, you hit it off, you then submit your materials. You submit it to the recruiter, and then you submit it to the person that you had the informational interview with. Say, hey, just a heads up, you know, I submitted through the proper protocol, the proper channels, but I wanted to let you know that I submitted my resume, and here's a copy. You know, as we talked about in our meeting, I'd be grateful, or I'd be really happy about working here. I think that I identified and connected with a lot that's going on, and I would really appreciate it if you could pass this along, or something along those lines. So you're working it from the inside.
Yeah, that's where getting out there really helps, because you can then say, Kristen, I saw you on the panel, and I always felt passionate about immigration law. I would really welcome the opportunity to work with you as an intern. So if you go to, you know, bar association or, you know, different law student organization events where there are brown bag lunches or panels or things like that, you are making more and more connections. You're learning more about different practice areas, and you're also building your spheres of influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're a little bit over, so if you have any other questions, if you want to come down quickly, that would be great. Otherwise,